Kevin Mitnick has been part of the 2600 community for many years, and his story resulted in a documentary that Emmanuel put together and put a lot of work into called Freedom Downtime. If you haven't seen that, I highly suggest you pick it up. I don't know if it's for sale out there, but if not, it should be. But let's get straight away to Kevin Mitnick.
Hello. How's everybody doing? All right. Hello. Test this. Okay, perfect. I could walk around now. It's great to be back. I'm sorry, I was supposed to speak here 2 years ago, but I was in Bogota, Colombia, and either from the food or the water, I ended up getting really sick. Ended up in the hospital in Colombia. They couldn't figure out what virus I had or what I ate that put me in there for about 8 days. I remember I'm sitting there in the hospital, all of a sudden, like 3 days later, the phone rings. I pick it up, figure it's my family, right? It's some guy from CNN. He goes, "Kevin, what's going on?" And first of all, how did you know I was in the hospital? B, how did you get my number? And he says, "Oh, no, we found out you're in the hospital. We want to know what's going on." So I just told him I'm sick. I have a flu. But then he started getting into more interesting questions. He goes, "So why exactly are you in Bogota, Colombia?" I told him I couldn't tell him. But yeah, so I'm sorry I didn't get to make it last Hope, but I'm here today, and I'm just going to go through some stories that you might find entertaining. I'm going to show you guys how you could easily unmask caller ID. So when anybody calls you, like on your cell phone, there's a real quick and easy way you could do it. So basically, you don't have privacy. Get over it. Right? Have any of you already do that? Do you already unmask your caller ID when people call you? Because the old way of doing that is you forward the incoming call to an 800 number and then forward it through one of these services back. But there's a much easier way. And last week, I'm proud to announce I got to sign my book deal with Little Brown. It's a publisher in here in New York, and I'm going to be able to write my life story. I had to wait a long time. Finally, I get to tell my side. I had to wait 7 years because part of my plea agreement with the federal government was that I couldn't profit off my story for 7 years, and that expired in 2007. And then it took a while for my co-author and I to write up a proposal, and it went around to these publishing houses, and I finally got the deal. So I hope, maybe in the next conference, I hope this is not really the last hope, but if it is, but the next HackerCon, I'll be able to present that book all to you. So, some stories. I don't know, how many of you were here when I spoke 4 years ago? Okay, wow, okay, about 30% to 50%. So I might go over some of the same stories. Just sit back and relax, and hopefully the people that weren't here will be entertained. When I first got into computers, it really started when I was a young kid. When I was 11 years old, I was fascinated with magic. And I used to hang out at the magic store on the weekends to learn. My mom used to go to work and I had to go to school. Then on the weekends, I'd go to the magic store and kind of sit there and try to watch the salespeople perform illusions, and then I tried to learn the secrets. And then from magic, I fell into this hobby called amateur radio. And I think you just heard that they're offering amateur radio tests. And when I started in amateur radio, this is where I got very interested in telephony, because ham radio, they had things called auto patch back in the days, where you can make phone calls, but you couldn't do it for personal use. So once I got into amateur radio, I met another student in high school in Los Angeles, California, and this kid was into phone freaking. And he wanted to borrow one of my ham radios, and in exchange, he said he will teach me a little bit about this unknown world of me of telephones. And this kid could do amazing things at the time that I thought was amazing. He can call a telephone number, a local number, put in a 5-digit code, and call anywhere in the world. Little did I know, he was using Sprint and MCI at the time. If he had somebody's telephone number, he can call a secret number at the phone company called the CNA Bureau, and he can get the name and telephone number. If he just had my parents' names, he was able to get their non-published numbers. So this was all very interesting to me. So I became involved in this area of phone phreaking. And then because I'm a prankster, I took this area of phone phreaking and I applied it to pulling pranks on friends. So one of the first things I did was I accessed a telephone company switch in Pasadena, California, and I was friends with another guy that was also into phone phreaking, and I changed the class of service on his home telephone to that of a payphone. So whenever he or his parents would try to make a call, it'd say, please deposit a quarter. That was fun. But what's even more interesting is intercepting directory assistance. There was a special way of calling a toll-free number, and then with the A, B, and C, D tones, you could actually set up intercepts on directory assistance around the United States. And they really fixed this flaw after we had fun with them for about a weekend. Especially Providence, Rhode Island, people would call in, and we get to play directory assistance operator. And you could imagine, 17 and 18 years old, the fun you could have, right? So people would call in, I'd say, what city? They'd say Providence, Rhode Island. I'd say, name please. They'd give me the name. And I'd say, hold on, I'm looking that up for you, sir. And I'd say, oh, by the way, we're doing a survey. Do you mind spending about 15 to 20 seconds to complete our survey today? He goes, sure. And I'd say, okay, one of our first questions, are you at home or in the office? I'm at home. Do you have our current yellow pages and white pages at home? Yes, I do. Then why are you calling me? Another call, someone, what city? Providence, Rhode Island. May I have the name, ma'am? Sure, it's John Smith. Okay, one moment, please. That number is 555-21#37. What? 555-21#37. And they'd go, how do I dial a half? And I said, between the 1 and zeros, you're dialing the phone, you just kind of give it a little bit of a nudge, or you can go down to our phone center stores, they existed at the time, and you can buy one of our new phones that has halves on it. Unfortunately, that fun only lasted for the weekend. Because we did a little bit more immature pranks, but I'm not going to go into that over here in this conference because I'm being recorded. And by the way, anything I talk about today, just my disclaimer, everything happened over 5 years ago, so it's past the federal statute of limitations. All right, so just so we know. Okay, perfect. But when I was in the amateur radio, I also was a prankster, and my target was my favorite, not my favorite, but the most well-known fast food restaurant in the industry, McDonald's. Have any of you played with McDonald's with radio in the audience? And you know what fun you could have, right? So when a customer drives up to the drive-in window and places an order, I, with my friends, parked across the street, could take over the system. So now the customer's not speaking to the guy inside with the headset, he's speaking to me. So you can imagine, right? Customer drives up, yes, may I take your order, please? Yada, yada, yada. And say, well, congratulations, you're our 50th customer today. Drive forward, your order's for free. And then I had a friend that did a really good Indian accent, right? So what happened is the customer would place the order, and it kept getting repeated back incorrectly, right? For about 10 or 15 times, so the person loses patience. And then, of course, there was menu changes at McDonald's, where no longer were there hamburgers, French fries, and sodas. It was all burritos, tacos, and hot dogs. So after messing with this one McDonald's, this was in Hollywood, California, they put a sign on the drive-up window that it's closed, because they kept getting messed with. So the manager of this McDonald's comes out right after we were playing with him for a while. He comes out and he's looking in the parking lot and he's looking for the culprit. Who's messing with their system? And he's looking around and he has no idea. Again, we're sitting across the street of a big boulevard. It's like right over here on Broadway. And we're watching, we're laughing in the car. And so this guy starts looking around, he sees nothing. He goes up to the drive-up speaker and he's examining it and he's looking at it like, he's like it's possessed. And he's like looking around. And then he doesn't see anything, so he puts his face right next to the speaker. I couldn't resist. What the fuck are you looking at? And this guy, Lou. I never saw a guy run so fast except when. It was great. I mean, we had a great time with McDonald's. So, yeah, those were kind of interesting pranks. Back in 1988, I don't know if you know my history, that was the first time I was federally busted for computer hacking. A friend of mine and I were hacking into a company called Digital Equipment Corporation. And what happened is we had a falling out, and he informed the FBI what I was doing, and they set up a sting operation. I was arrested. At the time, the federal prosecutors had told the judge that I had the capability of starting a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone. At the time I was in court, when I went to court for my detention hearing, as they call it, I was expecting to get out, because I just spent 3 days in Terminal Island Federal Prison, and it wasn't a fun experience. And I go to court and I'm ready, I'm looking at, when am I going to get out of here? And then when the federal prosecutor said that I could just whistle into a phone and start a nuclear war, I actually grinned, because I thought he would lose all credibility with the court. But what happened is the judge says, "You're absolutely right, Mr. Prosecutor. In fact, we need to make sure that he can't even get to a telephone in the prison." So I ended up in the hole in solitary confinement. But eventually I was released. And at that time I was keeping my nose clean. I found new hobbies and new interests. And my brother called me one day, my half-brother, and he told me that this guy, Eric Hines, wants to speak with me, that he used to be a hacker, and he has a lot of interesting things he'd like to talk to me about. And I kind of really wasn't that interested. And my brother called me again, saying, "This guy really wants to talk to you." So I called the telephone number. It turned out to be this guy that wasn't Eric, but what he would do is he would actually page Eric to his number, and he'd conference it in this ultra, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. So I finally get this guy on the phone, and he seemed very knowledgeable about phone phreaking. He knew a lot about the internal systems at the phone company. He knew about equipment in the central offices, and it intrigued me because I had a passion for technology. So we set up a meeting to meet at a Hamburger Hamlet, and I brought a friend of mine along, a guy named Louis DePayne, who incidentally was my hacking partner for a number of years. And we meet this guy, Eric, at a Hamburger Hamlet, and he starts telling us that he was part of the Kevin Poulsen case. Everybody familiar with Kevin Poulsen? Okay. And he starts telling me about all their escapades into phone company offices. I'm sitting there and I'm listening. And I said, "So what happened to you? Because Poulsen was busted." He says, "Well, I was in Texas and I was busted for doing some sort of credit card fraud, but they wanted some information about how I was doing the fraud, the FBI, so I cooperated with them and told them how I was able to commit these frauds." This is him telling me. "And I got out early. I got a deal." I said, "So they didn't ask you about Poulsen?" He goes, "No, they only wanted to know about me." Doesn't sound like the FBI I know. Usually they want to know about everything. So eventually, during the conversation, he says, "We're talking about different systems at the phone company, Cosmos, SCCS. I'm not going to go into all the MISAR. Remember all these, familiar with all these names of internal systems at Ma Bell? And then he mentions a system called SAS. He goes, "You know about SAS, don't you?" I go, "Maybe. What does it do?" He says, "Where you can monitor anybody in Pacific Bell." And I go, no. I go, "Tell me more about it." And then he clammed up and didn't say another word, and the meeting ended. And I was intrigued. I wanted to find out. I didn't know about this system called SAS. What exactly is it? And how he told me he discovered it is he and Kevin Poulsen were actually in one of the phone company central offices, found the equipment, and were able to hook up a tape recorder and actually record the protocol going back and forth. So what I did is I called the phone company, and using my social engineering skills, I wanted to find out the company that developed this tool. And so after about 2 or 3 phone calls, I found out the name of the company that manufactured SAS. I do some research on this company, and I find out that they went out of business. They no longer are